And I've been thinking, what goes wrong in these interactions? Hi, my name is Mariya Delano. I am a content marketing and audience research specialist at Kalyna Marketing. And today I wanted to tell you a quick story. So I got a concussion last week in a very silly way. I hit my head on the dryer door while trying to do the laundry. It was a whole thing, wear a helmet, be safe out there when you're doing chores. But it was a few days after my concussion, and I had a worsening of a few concerning symptoms, which meant I needed to go to the ER to get my brain scanned. So last night, my husband and I headed to the ER around 9 p.m., and we ended up waiting there basically all night. We got back home at 7 a.m., and sitting in the waiting room, had a lot of time on my hands, couldn't really do much, and I started thinking. And I was thinking a lot about triage and where patient doctor or just patient medical staff interactions often go wrong. Because if you've ever been to a hospital or an ER room or anything really, you've probably got a horror story or two, right? Of being dismissed, of not being listened to appropriately. And if you don't have a horror story like that, I assume that many people that you know might, and you have heard them. And I've been thinking, what goes wrong in these interactions? I think it comes down to a fundamental lack of respect almost, and an assumption that the patient on the other side doesn't actually know, first of all, what's wrong with them and what is good for them, and they don't know what's important. It's this sort of the same dynamic as a bad car salesman. I often think of a moment in this book called The Human Element, where they describe why we get so annoyed with car salespeople. And we get annoyed with them when it's clear that when they're asking us questions and we're starting to respond, they've already pinned us down. They already think they know what our problem is, and they already think they know the perfect solution. And all they're doing is waiting for us to stop talking and for them to launch into their pre-prepared speech where they already know exactly what they're going to say, what they're going to try to sell you on, and what they're insisting on. And it's the same kind of lack of listening and lack of consideration for the other party in these patient interactions, right? Frustrations start when you're describing your symptoms, when you're describing what's wrong with you. You might be describing what you think might be going on or what's the important context. And that triage nurse or the person at the check-in desk or, the doctor themselves isn't listening. And you feel like they don't respect your opinion. You feel like they don't care what you actually have to say. They've already decided. They've decided if you're making things up. They've decided if you're overinflating your problems or undermining them, and nothing you say will really make a difference, right? And that's when mistakes happen often, because people miss something, Medical professionals might miss an important detail. They might dismiss somebody who actually does have a very serious issue and needs to be examined. They might not prioritize them accordingly, and they might be stuck in the waiting room while they really should be attended to sooner. And that can cause complications, that can cause wrongful care, and all kinds of problems, right? It can also cause, in the long term, an issue with medical research altogether, because if everybody's operating under one assumption, they don't question it, they don't listen to patients when they say that that assumption is wrong, such as a diagnosis or a particular treatment method, nobody might bother to research why patients are feeling a certain way and find out that an assumption or a way that things were taught in medical school was actually wrong. And thankfully, by the way, I'm okay. My brain wasn't bleeding. I did get a scan, even though I did wait a while. So I'm fine. But what if I wasn't? The triage nurse actually didn't really listen to me. And the doctor indicated that he was not given some very important information about my symptoms, and that it seemed like I was not prioritized correctly and I should have been seen sooner because my symptoms matched potential brain bleeding, which could have caused a ton of complications if it wasn't caught early. I should have been given a scan sooner. Thankfully, when I was given the scan, it didn't show anything, but what if it did? It would have been because I wasn't listened to correctly. was because the right questions weren't asked and my answers weren't considered. So why am I telling you all of this on a marketing channel and account? Because I see the same problem all the time with marketing, with product features, with sales, with content. Assuming that we know what the customer wants, assuming that we know what the audience wants, assuming that they want a particular solution, or maybe they want to learn about things a certain way, or that they're in a particular part of the buyer journey, and that people in this function, in this buyer journey, only want things a certain way. And it's not true necessarily. We don't need scripts to depend on, or specific rigid ideas of how to talk to our customers or our audience. What we need is some time to stop, pause, ask questions, and listen. This is why I'm such a big fan of audience research, because I think the most interesting findings, the most interesting ideas, and the best opportunities for marketing, for business, for promoting yourself, for anything, come out of those unexpected moments when you hear something that doesn't quite match what you were expecting. Going back to our medical situation, maybe you've assumed that this patient has a concussion, and then they say something, a symptom that doesn't quite match it. Maybe a really weird tingling somewhere that you weren't expecting. You could dismiss that and continue with your assumption of mild concussion, same profile, everything as expected, or you could ask them some questions. And you might find out that something totally different is going on, and discover a better course of treatment and catch something and help that person get a better outcome. And it's the same thing in marketing. You could assume that people want, a 101 guide to project management tools, or another LinkedIn post about data analytics frameworks. Or you could listen and talk to people, or analyze online activity and do social listening at scale, and discover that actually people are saying that they're annoyed with these things, or they're saying that they already know all about project management tools, but now they want to know how to set them up better. How do they get more utility out of their existing project management tools? And if you actually don't resist these new ideas, and if you make your marketing content, and if you plan things based on these unexpected findings of what you've heard from the people that you're supposedly making content for, you might be surprised by what you find. So that's my lesson for today, I guess. Listen to people. Don't assume that you know better than them, and don't assume that the things you've decided and the plan of action you've already got is the best treatment for whatever illness they came to you with. Thank you.